Welcome, everyone. My name is Bob Perkins. I'm the founder and the chairman of the AAISP, the Association for Inside Sales Professionals. Thanks so much for joining us on today's webinar. You know, today's topic is excellent, and it's very pertinent if you're an inside sales rep, a digital sales rep, or even if you're a sales rep in the field. So we're going to talk about the importance of multi-channel communication. Now, you know, it used to be that if you were in sales or inside sales, that it was 100% the phone and email, but times have changed. In fact, the AAISP just completed its annual trends and top challenges research. We found out that inside sales reps are using a lot more methods to communicate besides email and voicemail. They're using things like instant messaging, texting is on the rise, LinkedIn, and live video is being used. So today's topic is going to talk about the importance of leveraging multiple channels of communication. The speakers will share best practices on how to do that, and also what you can expect in terms of an ROI when you do it effectively. So I'm pleased that a couple of excellent thought leaders are with us today. First, we have Jim Lochry. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Bob. How are you?
I'm doing great. It was good seeing you a few weeks ago in San Francisco. Jim was a presenter there. He's the Senior Vice President of ConnectLeader, and he has lots of experience managing and leading large organizations as well as smaller startups. He was a vice president at Oracle, and he's a real thought leader, and it's great to have you today, Jim. So thanks for joining us.
You bet.
Also, Ken Jisser. Now, I bet you a lot of people on the line have met Ken. If you're out in the Bay Area, Ken is our Silicon Valley chapter president. He puts on some great chapter meetings where well over 100 people will attend. I've been to some myself. He's also an AISP board member where he helps give us advice and guidance. And he's presented at numerous AISP events, over 20 years of inside sales and sales leadership experience. It's really good to have you on today's webinar. Ken, welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Glad to be here.
So let's jump right in and get started, Jim. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Bob. Well, welcome everybody to the webinar. I hope that this could be a productive session, a learning session for everybody on here, because I think, as Bob mentioned early on, our presentation is going to be about the need for salespeople and marketing people, for that matter, as well, to change the game, to increase the number of conversations, interactions that they're having with their customers, and to do so by leveraging multiple channels of communication that are available to them. So hopefully at the end of the webinar today, you'll understand what those pros and cons of each level of different channel of communication there is, kind of the evolution of where we've come as from a sales profession perspective, and then we'll get into talking about best practices. How do you implement a strategy and a plan that will allow you really to maximize the amount of interactions that you're having with your customers? And by the way, it's a numbers game. Everybody always says sales is a number of games, but it's really about trying to optimize the number of interactions you have with customers that lead to meetings, that lead to presentations and pipeline, that lead to forecasts and lead to closure. So it's all about trying to increase those numbers so that you're able to exceed your quota. So to begin with, I guess the best way to talk about, introduce the subject is, where have sales evolved from? Obviously we've had different levels of sophistication, but there's like 5 or 6 types of sales communication channel. And the first that everybody knows about and can probably relate to is that of the direct salesperson, where there's face-to-face selling, and there are some really positive things that are associated with that. However, there are several things that aren't so great about it. Like, it's extremely expensive. It doesn't really scale efficiently. And more importantly, in today's business world, it doesn't support the customer communication preference, meaning that depending upon the customer that you're dealing with, they may choose not to have a direct face-to-face communication with you, or they may not want to necessarily get a phone call from you early on in the process. So there's a variety of ways in which your customers may choose to actually want to interact with you, and you need to be open to all those. When you're just using direct sales, face-to-face sales, it obviously doesn't do that. There are some positives to this method. As inside sales professionals, you probably understand that if you're supporting an outside sales team, enterprise sales team, that you really look for them to be able to build that trusted customer relationship. And it also fits the need where you have a higher average sales price or deal spend, and calling on large enterprise sales opportunities that have complex sales cycles. Along came direct mail, and direct mail certainly introduced the people's mailboxes overflowing with mail and people's inboxes. But what is surprising is, based upon this latest survey that was done through a DMA response rate report, we still see that there is pretty good open rate for direct mail. On letter-sized, things that are sent, it's still 3.5%, which is equivalent to a click-through rate if you're talking about, tracking different ways people respond to your emails. But there's cons and pros associated with direct mail as well. It's very expensive. The validation of impact is difficult to really measure, and obviously it's considered outdated, and it's environmentally a negative message. But it can be scalable, but at a cost. And the differentiation is potentially a plus today, and why people still use it, because everybody thinks, don't send direct mail. Well, it can also be a point of differentiation. So I mentioned that about direct mail. That's kind of the sales 2.0, I call it, in terms of sales interaction or communication with customers. And then came the telesales people, and they're getting on the phone, and this is a really great way to reach out and speak to a lot of people. Fortunately, we got past the string and the aluminum can, but the challenge to be able to get a hold of people on the phone, it never has been easy, at least in the period of time that I've been in sales and managing sales teams. It's become even more difficult, more challenging. People hide behind their voicemails, and they use their own private cell phone that they don't give out to anybody, and trying to reach somebody at the desk is really difficult, and that's why it's important that you really try to get people's mobile phone numbers. But just to give you an idea of the challenge of trying to reach director level people and higher, and these statistics are by the Bridge Group and Serious Decisions, and I know AAISP has done surveys that support this. But when you're trying to reach somebody that's, a director or higher level in an organization, it oftentimes takes over 20 attempts to try to reach this person on the phone. And if you look at what the average number of outbound calls that are being done by inside sales reps today, it runs about 65 a day. So what this equates to is a grand total of 3.1 meaningful conversations that you're having with your key prospects on a daily basis, or around 15.5 per week, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? You're spending all that time dialing, navigating through the phone trees, leaving a voicemail, dealing with gatekeepers, or just not getting any answer on the other end, or it's a wrong number. So it's a really challenge trying to get a hold of people. And so that's the challenge with the with the voice side of things. Okay, so here we've got some additional advantages though as well, because if you do get that person on the phone, there's a tremendous amount of value associated with it. You're able to gather information and diagnose the needs of the customers and ask questions so that you have a much better understanding of what they're trying to accomplish, and plus give you the ability to articulate and differentiate your solution and value versus your competitors. More importantly, being able to have this voice communication with somebody, even though it does take a lot of effort to do so, it's the golden unicorn. It allows you to build that trusted relationship with the client through a conversation that you're never going to be able to do, for instance, like through email or through direct mail, where you don't have a dialogue. What you have is a monologue. So there is advantages to utilizing voice, and it should be an important part of your strategy as well. Along comes email. Oh, this is the magic. This is like manna from heaven for the salespeople of today. No longer do you need to actually talk with the customer, right? All you need to do is send out a really, snappy, pithy email talking about the greatness of your solution and why they need to buy it, and they're going to respond back to you. Well, the survey showed that it's very, very effective, certainly from a cost perspective. When you look at the numbers of emails that are being sent out, what you're seeing is a pretty dramatic decrease, actually, in the click-through rate. It's down to 2.62% click-through. Open may be 21%, but they open and delete. So as effective as email is in terms of really what I call throwing out a broad net and reaching a wide variety, a number of people, and to do it cost effectively, is a really great channel. However, it's got its challenges, okay? It's great for making, creating awareness in the marketplace. It's very cost effective, as I said, and it's scalable. However, there's massive email deletes, excessive noise in the market. People are just getting overrun with emails in their inbox, and gosh knows you could set all kinds of filters and things to basically ignore the vast majority of communication that people are trying to send you through email campaigns. The other less than desirable effect of email marketing is it doesn't really create that dialogue that I spoke earlier about with the customer. It sends that one, I'm trying to sell you monologue communication to the client. Most times, like I said, with the exception maybe of a percent or two, don't actually respond back to you, all right? And you're not able to build that trusted relationship. But it's an extremely important strategy for doing the things like I said above there, creating awareness, and it's cost effective. And more importantly, what it helps do, it helps build the opportunity for you to be able to connect with them on the phone and to have that conversation that really ends up leading to the trusted relationship and differentiation, and ending up separating yourself from your competitors. Sales, customer interaction 5.0. We're now in social. We're trying to find all kinds of ways in which we could learn more about our customers, right? So we could have a special insight or a way of getting to them and connecting with them that email or phone calls or direct mail just don't provide. And so, we've become great now at email, at social networking, trolling, and learning information about people. And that is a very, very valuable asset that you should leverage, but it alone isn't enough either. So here's the poor sales guy. He's sitting there at his desk and he's like pulling his hair out, wondering, what can I do to really increase the amount of customers and prospects that that I'm interacting with. I've sent out all these emails, campaign after campaign, and then when I try to reach people, I'm unable to do it. I'm manually dialing these people, and that's just not a very effective way for me to get through to them. So how am I going to be able to really increase the numbers I need to be able to exceed my revenue quota? And the answer is, there is no magic. It requires the individual to be able to deal with some real frustrations and challenges that salespeople deal with and find a way to fix them. Okay, one of them is that today a lot of CRM data that salespeople operate from are inaccurate. It's not being updated and cleansed the way it should be. And that leads to morale deflating activity on part of the salesperson when he's constantly trying to reach people that are no longer at that email address, no longer at that phone number. And he keeps going through this, time and time again. His ability to be able to accurately target and the profiling of prospects as to who is the most likely to buy from them. How do I prioritize my time as to who I should be contacting first? I get this great marketing communication, campaign information that says, hey, look, we sent all these emails out to all these people, and here's the list, and start calling on them. Well, not everybody that marketing sends that campaign notice to is, in a way that you would be able to prioritize who you would want to contact first, depending upon what your territory is, what products you're selling into there. Certainly marketing should be taking that into consideration when they're doing that campaign, but surprisingly, a lot of times they don't. So the salespeople really need to try to prioritize their time, because at the end of the day, that is the biggest asset that all salespeople have. Whether you're inside or outside, it's your time. And it's making best use of your time and prioritizing and targeting those opportunities that are most likely to end in a positive result for you. Another challenge that exists today is because the perceived difficulty of reaching people on the phone, and if you're not using the right technology to do that, it can be a very frustrating thing to do. And so the belief that you're able to you're not able to communicate with customers in a way that you're really effective or as good as you should be, because you're not doing it very often. You're sending a lot of emails out, but you're really not engaging in a lot of dialogue and conversation with the clients. So a lot of new salespeople aren't as effective at doing this as they should be. And an additional advantage and frustration is that marketing needs better information to help target and profiling and message to your best prospects. And the way they do that is by more conversations, more communication with customers, and feedback that you could give them. So I want to ask everybody that's on this call to think about it. For your organization and what you're doing, what is the best interaction or communication channel to use? This is something you got to think about and decide, what really works best. So before I go to this next slide, I'm going to go ahead and tell you the answer. There is not one. You want to leverage them all, as I said earlier in the presentation, and what you need is to provision your salespeople with a platform that's got tools that allow you to leverage all the different types of communication that you're going to want to engage in. From a dialer perspective, you want to be able to have a click to dial. You want to be able to have a power dialer. You want to be able to have a parallel agent-based dialing solution to really drive the number of conversations that you're having with your clients to really increase the top part of your sales funnel. You want to be able to use a product that provides cadence. In other words, the strategy that allows you to set up a series of smart sequencing as to how you're going to interact with a client, where you as a salesperson or as your sales organization or sales ops person is able to set up what is the most effective sequencing of customer interactions and automate as much of that as possible so that the salespeople aren't having to do it themselves all the time, and that things aren't slipping through the cracks. So sales cadence is really important, not only in terms of the strategy of interaction, but making sure that you're leveraging all those channels, whether it be email, voice, text, social, and other. The other thing that's really valuable, and I talked about data, is that when you're utilizing and leveraging that contact information in the CRM, it sure would be great to be able, in a real-time basis, if you run into a contact that isn't any longer at that phone number, they're no longer with the company, or that it's just no longer a valid contact period, to be able to utilize sources that could enrich your data, your contact information. You're trying to reach Bob Jones. Bob's no longer at UPS, and you are able to go to a source like a Zoom Info or something like that, where you could actually acquire that data, update that contact record automatically within your CRM, and no longer waste your time trying to dial or to try to email this person that no longer has valid contact information in your CRM.
Hey,
the other
Jim.
thing that is really nice to do is to be able to leverage things as a management team like sales gamification, where you're able to provide real-time sales metric performance data as to how your people are performing, and to do it in a fun and motivating way, instead of just throwing up the same information, tired information every day or two. Here's your number, here's your quota, you're at this level of performance. Try to do things that are fun, that are innovative, that salespeople find interesting and competitive, and it will motivate them to better performance.
Hey, Jim.
So, yes.
Yeah, hey, it's Bob, and I just had a couple of reminders here. If you have any questions, attendees, please go to either the chat or the Q&A and pose your question. We'll do our best to get to them. We did have one comment come in around sharing of best practices. Wants to just make sure that we get to that point. I know you will, and I know Ken will, but just mark that down as a note to make sure that we have time to cover some of the best practices on utilizing different modes of communication. Thanks.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's right where we're at right now. I'm gonna Ken, go ahead and take control, and it's now in your hands. And Ken's going to talk to you about those best practices and some experiences that he has, and what kind of ROI results that you might be able to expect from this.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jim. So as you were suggesting earlier, there's lots of forms of communication that sales reps can utilize to engage with prospects and customers. And then in addition to lots of forms of communication, guess what? There's lots of tools, and what differentiates these tools is how you go about deploying them. So we're going to talk about some best practices on how to deploy Salesforce automation tools. So in addition to talking about these best practices, we're going to talk about the best practices of combining both email and voice. And we're going to go through a case study as well as some results of a current joint customer here. So first of all, everyone believes, I just bought a new sales tool, now what? And there's really a best practice of how you go about deploying these sales automation tools. Immediately people think, I just bought a tool, it's going to increase productivity. Not always the case, okay? And the reason why it doesn't always increase productivity is because of inertia within the internal sales organization. You see, when you buy these tools, if you don't identify the use cases of how this tool is going to be applied and where you're going to point it as part of your sales process, you're going to get a lot of pushback from sales reps. And why do you get that pushback? It's because of FUD. It's the fear, it's the uncertainty, and the doubt of this tool actually working for them. So there's some really good best practices you can deploy when you think about buying a tool and providing that tool to your sales organization. You should really follow these kind of 3 steps. So step 1 is get your sales team together. It's the last thing you want to do is buy a tool and then try to get your sales team on board with using this tool. It's not the best practice. What you want to let the sales team know is you're evaluating these tools, and we want to look at the features and functionalities of these tools, agree on the use cases, and when I say use cases, what I mean by that is where in the sales process are you going to be leveraging these tools? Is it for the people you haven't spoken to before? Is it for the people that you have? Those sorts of things. You want to make sure that whatever tool you're evaluating, you get your team's feedback, think about the features and functionality of these tools, and then figure out in the sales process where you're going to be using them. The second step is then you got to design it into your system. And this part most often does not require your sales team's feedback. This is about getting with your internal team, your sales ops team, your CRM administrator. You want to make sure that when you identify the tool that you're looking to leverage and that you can apply it to the certain use cases of your sales process, that you design it into your system and you have a process for that tool, so that you can, again, then drive the reporting that you're looking for out of that implementation. Once you've got the use cases identified, you got the feedback of the sales team, you got them on board to use this tool, they know how they're going to be using it, you design it into the system, then you go right into implementation. And today I'm going to talk about a current customer, this is a $2 billion publicly traded company in the medical industry. They launched 4 SaaS-based software products. So just like a lot of companies out there, that were typically in software are now becoming software companies because they're providing web services and software-based services for their prospects and customers. This company happened to launch 4 new SaaS products. What we did for them is we deployed Marketo. We implemented our lead and activity management process. We helped them hire, train, and develop 2 new SDRs. We happened to use the ConnectLeader sales acceleration platform because that was the platform that really covered all of our channels of communication that we wanted to engage in, and we grew pipeline by over 400%. So the 2 primary tools that we used on the ConnectLeader platform is we used the True Cadence email capability, and we also used the Team Dialer live conversation automation system. When we combined these 2 tools together, the results were explosive. Let me just share with you, this is the typical response rates you're going to see when you email people you have not spoken to. Now take a look at these numbers. Look how low the response rates are. It's just a fraction of a percent when you send out an email to get a direct reply. When you send out an email for the prospect to open the email, click through, and start browsing your website, those are called multi-page visitors. Often those are scored leads, or sometimes, and if they hit the right score, they're MQLs, right? The third is the single page views and the email opens. But when you're emailing people that you have not spoken to before, sometimes the sales automation tools you're evaluating aren't the best tools for that use case. So this is a perfect example. In this customer, we decided, even though the ConnectLeader platform had the capability to do emailing and Cadence capabilities, we said, hey, we're not going to email these people with that tool. We're going to use the marketing automation system, because what we need to do, if we're going to try to get some response rates and get some MQLs here, we need the ability to send lots of emails to lots of different people. And so the best tool for that was marketing automation. And when we set up the marketing automation system, we also had to keep in mind, we're going to be preparing the sales organization here for automated dialing. No longer do they have the luxury of doing 3 minutes of research on 3 different sources and then picking up the phone to call them. We were going to take these lists, these MQLs, and we were going to put them into the dialer to follow up with them. And when we do that, we had to make sure that the reps knew the reason for the call before anyone ever picked up the phone. they couldn't do the research because it goes so fast. So we did, we aligned, this is actually straight off the Marketo website. There's only one way to really implement marketing automation to Salesforce properly. If you align these terms up with Marketo and Salesforce, and this is the same with any marketing automation system, not just Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, all of them have these sorts of plumbing that can tie into Salesforce, and you want to tie them into this way, because when you do that, what actually becomes available to the salesperson is what the person did. Like, did they go to a trade show? Did they go to a field event? Did they download something from our website? Did they register for a webinar? What did these people do? And so we call this fuel lines with our prospects and customers. We set up fuel lines from the marketing automation system to the CRM, so that when reps pick a list of people to call to load into the dialer, they already know the reason for the call. These are thematic lists. They don't have to do any research. The sales reps and the SDR team, when they pick this list, they know that everyone filled out a contact us form, or downloaded a trial, or registered for a webinar, or went to a field event or a trade show. These thematic lists enable them to go faster. So they're not preparing and doing research one conversation at a time. They're prepared to have lots of conversations at one time. And when we set that up, we set the benchmark. Well, now that we have this new capability, and we created these fuel lines into the CRM for the SDR team to just pick and load into the dialer, we said we need a minimum number of activity metrics. And there's no way you can do this dialing manually. We all know that. We used a tool to do that. But we said we're going to make 500 dials a day. We're going to speak to 25 people a day. We're going to try to schedule 25 meetings a month. We're going to try to complete 10 meetings a month, and we're going to create 10 opportunities a month using this process. And that translated to an ASP and of a pipeline that was going to help them reach their revenue objectives. But we knew very quickly, with the limited resources we had, we needed to revert to automation to help us get more outbound effort. And that was the minimum activity metrics that we put per SDR. And then we used the email capability for the follow-up conversations. So not that we stayed out of the world of the not contacted leads, because we left that to marketing, to nurture, to email. They had a better tool for that. It was a better use case for the marketing automation system to email those individuals. But when we spoke to people and we weren't able to schedule a meeting on the first conversation, and they requested follow-up, we put them into this Cadence capability that the platform ConnectLeader offered, and the response rates were through the roof, way higher than when we're emailing people that we haven't spoken to before. So this is the big difference between emailing not contacted people and contacted people. And the other thing I wanted to really turn you on to is look at the number of opt-outs just reduced dramatically to a fraction of a percent, less than 1% opted out, because we spoke to them. They were expecting the email, they requested more information, they were expecting it, we followed up with them, but then we put it into this Cadence capability, and we were not only voice nurturing them, calling them back, trying to get them back on the phone, but we also had some air cover with the email capability as well. And when you combine those two, the response rates are very, very high. The waterfall that we created following this process was we sent X number of emails, we made X number of dials, which yielded this many conversations, this many scheduled meetings, this many completed meetings, and this number of created opportunities, which equated to that pipeline. And then, of course, we had close won and close lost below that. So let me show you the results of this SDR team that we assembled together using the ConnectLeader platform with some services as well from the pipeline group. We actually decided to build an SDR team the worst time of the year, in October, right when you're getting close to the holidays, where you got run into Thanksgiving and the religious holidays in December. But we stayed steadfast, and then it was the same process, same consistent process, and then boom, in January, when the new year hit, that blue line, they scheduled 120 meetings in 1 month. Completed 55, created 46 opportunities, which yielded 25 closed won deals. The following month, February, 96 scheduled meetings. Now, here's the trick question. How many SDRs do you think this SDR team had? To save you some anxiety here, the answer was, that's the result of one SDR. It was a pilot. They weren't even sure if this SDR program was the right approach. So they just said, we're going to hire one SDR, and we're going to take all your advice and guidance, Ken, and we're going to put it through this process and see what happens. And those were the results in January and February, and I didn't get the updated data for March yet from them. But the last January and February, it's extraordinary, explosive results. So what were the best practices? What
Hey, Ken. Ken, go 1 second here. Question came in. Go back to how many meetings in January again?
121 scheduled meetings in January.
Okay, so here's the question. I'll sort of interpret it that was posed, and that is, at what level of automation did it take to, because everybody on this call would love every SDR to get 100 meetings in a month. That's off the charts. Is this possible to, what level of automation is required for that? And then secondly is, if you don't currently have that level of automation, can you still, by following a best practice, improve your meetings? Sort of a twofold question.
Sure. So just think about, let me just backstep. So we did several things, right? We emailed people we hadn't spoken to before, and we used the marketing automation system to do that, and to do that in volume for us, because we knew the response rates were going to be so low. But that also helped us email cleanse the database. So we removed out all these hard bounces and soft bounces and all the opt-outs, and what was left with was the email validated data. And then we took the responses of those email campaigns and put them into these fuel lines, which allowed us to then go from manual dialing to these sort of outbound metrics and automated dialing. There's no way you can go from, having 2 to 3 conversations a day to 25 a day without some orchestration and organization. But these are the activity metrics that one SDR performed on a daily basis to get those results. It was 500 dials a day. And then we combined that with the follow-up cadence, which also yielded some meetings when we followed up by both voice and email, and then that got us results.
So step number one, if I heard you correctly, step number one was, hey, let's clean up the data. Let's only call on valid data. That was sort of that step number one, right? Through marketing automation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. See, people often think, hey, I'm going to send these people an email to warm up my list. Well, the last time I checked, people didn't have temperature gauges sticking out of their neck saying how hot and cold they were, right? What they're actually experiencing was the database was just email validated before they put it into the dialing system. That's all they did. And then, people have this perception that when they send their prospects emails, that their prospects actually read these emails and actually get the warm and fuzzies inside.
Right.
All it is just validation on the database before you put it through this other layers of validation, right?
Yeah. Thanks.
Any questions from the audience? All right. So what are the best practices? Summarize very quickly. We said, hey, we're not going to let this one SDR, worry about writing emails and sending those to people he's never spoken to before in small little bite-sized chunks, because we knew the response rates were so low and the email volumes were so low. Just the sales tool that we purchased for the dialing and for the cadence wasn't the best use case for that. Marketing automation was the better choice. And so we centrally managed the email communication within the marketing department, but we sent those emails on behalf of the reps. So it looked like it came from some of these, sales automation tools. And we focused the SDR, which said, hey, we're going to do this error cover for you. Since we got this error cover for you, all you need to do is worry about picking your lists and calling them, okay? And then when you speak to people and they ask for more information, you use the email follow-up for that piece. And so the email nurturing combined with the voice nurturing literally doubled the number of meetings. on a daily basis that we were getting. And that's a double, literally doubling on a daily basis. Previously, it was like one point, we were lucky to get 7 meetings a week, right? 1.4 meetings a day. That's not bad. That's typical, standard rates for, optimized SDR teams. What we started getting was 4 meetings a day.
Yeah.
Right? And that was through these thematic lists, leveraging the email campaigns combined with the dialer. And of course, we did our homework in advance before we even put anyone through this process. We figured out who our ideal customer profile was. And so what in the end, we eliminated all the excuses for calling. It was all done for them. The data was served up, the thematic lists were there, the follow-up process was wired to the wazoo, super tight, and then we had the email and voice nurturing. Just those two channels of activities really resulted, when it was orchestrated together, in a much more effective way for the customer.
Ken, a couple of questions just came in here, and I think there'll be real quick ones here. First,
Sure.
where was your data coming from? Was this a list, a purchase list, an opt-in list? What was the source data?
Yeah, so perfect. Great question, by the way, and I'm glad they asked. So these were doctors. The customers in the optometry industry, they launched some SaaS-based products for the optometry industry. These were doctors. And what that means is they're harder to get a hold of than just executives in IT or in sales or in marketing. They're meeting with patients. We were told you could never get these people on the phone. We were told they're not on social media. We were told they're just very low response rates. And we purchased a list. So the nice thing is every optometrist, there's only 47,000 of them in North America. We purchased the whole entire list, so we knew who they all were. But we defied all odds because we did the polar opposite of what everyone asked us to do.
Good. And the next question, Ken, was as far as a meeting that was set, a scheduled meeting as the final step, how much qualification was done prior to scheduling the meeting, typically?
Typically. So we look at those conversion rates, first of all, from completed meetings to opportunities. That's the black line that you see. 67% in February, 84% in January. March is right around, last time I checked, was around 70-something%. And so you can't get those sort of conversion rates without doing proper discovery and qualification. The technique is real simple. We call people up, we introduce ourselves, the company, we apologize for the unexpected call, we introduce ourselves, the company, we pique their curiosity, get them interested, and if they're not interested, we create a little anxiety, and then we sell the meeting. And once the meeting is sold, we say, hey, we just want to make sure we make the best use of your time, and we have the right resources on, just a few questions, and we ask the 5 silver bullets that really help us understand if this is going to be a good opportunity. If we don't like the answers for those 5 questions, it's a lot easier to cancel a meeting than to schedule one, so we'll just cancel it.
That's good. I'm curious, what are a couple of those questions, Ken? You got my curiosity piqued.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, who are the most appropriate people to get involved in this sort of, decision, or would be involved in the decision-making process? Now, how are you currently doing things today? Look, software is really interesting. If you look at, we do business with lots of software companies, and if you look at what software does, in generally speaking, it just automates some sort of manual process, right? Marketing automation, Salesforce automation, right? It's just automating some sort of manual process. So all we do is position our questions in a way and ask questions that help us identify error-prone, manual, repetitive tasks that are time-consuming and drive inefficiency within their organization. And oh, by the way, we happen to have a product that does that, that solves that problem. We don't position it that way. All we do is we drill into what they're doing today and the manual and error-prone processes. And what that does is it creates a significant amount of anxiety, which creates the curiosity, which enables us to schedule those meetings more effectively.
Good. That's a great one. How are you currently doing it today? And 9 times out of 10, they're doing something manual. That's great.
Yep.
Let's see. One more question. Thanks for asking these questions, by the way. The person wanted kind of a real life example of an email sequence. How many emails are you sending to your prospect, and how often? Maybe.
Yeah. So really good question. We set up a little spreadsheet, and we had a consistent, every email we rewrite has an introduce section, has like some, has the follow-up, the request for the type of follow-up we're doing, maybe has some bullet points, and we always offer a little bit more content to educate the prospects about what we're doing with other customers, because we already know people are interested in what their peers are doing. And so we always like to add a little bit of, here's what your peers are doing sort of thing in these emails. And we set up these like skeletons that in Excel, and we map them out for 12 months. And so we have an email that goes out just checking in every 2 weeks with a prospect until the cadence is completed. Typically, we're, within 6 months, we've either gotten them on their phone or gotten a reply back from the cadence. But it's real important. If you want better response rates, look, you want to make sure that you're adding some value in the email every single time. Don't be selfish, right? Don't just say, hey, any updates on getting a meeting? I mean, that's not very effective, right? You want to keep adding just a little bit of value into every single email that you send to the prospect to really show, some personalization and a noble effort of, really generating the interest on their part.
So that's a good point. We all have gotten these emails that said, hey, did you get the email I sent last week? Well, I'm wondering if, and there was no value in that kind of follow-up email. They're just trying to pester you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or they just keep resending the same email and saying, hey, any updates? You get a chance to take a look at it, and it's like, no the first time, no the second time, no the third time, off to the next, right? Whereas, if you added something that stimulated, either, look, I like to create emotions, because people need emotional cues in order for them to respond. And, using fear, that's the worst emotion you could try to create. If you don't reply, you're going to lose this offer, that sort of stuff. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt are the, FUD. That's what your competition is using against you. And the reason why they use it against you is because it creates inertia. It prevents change. And so when you use fear against your prospects, it prevents change. It doesn't get them to want to respond. But if you stress them out, anxiety is the negative anticipation of fear. If you use anxiety, what that does is it kind of stresses them out and gets them to want to take action now, as opposed to just waiting 6 months or to a year to respond to your email. So we use a bit of education and, and whenever we get the opportunity to create a little bit of anxiety about what they're doing today and their error-prone and manual tasks, to help get that, to stimulate the response. And then we always, again, offer a bit of content and then some education to show them, we're the best on the planet at doing this stuff, right?
Ken, another quick one here. The question was, so to be clear, you start with the phone calls first, then
we do.
Yeah.
No, we do the emails first, but
Yep.
The email is done through the marketing automation system. We're not using the sales tool for that. We're using the marketing tool for that. Yep. And then that, again, email validates the data and then provides these thematic lists, which, without these thematic lists, we're not able to make 500 dials a day and have 25 conversations. So want to be real clear about that. These thematic lists that I'm talking about, these are MQLs, right? This is what everyone in the industry refers to as an MQL, a scored lead, right? But the email validation on the list themselves just make better use of the dialer.
That's good, Ken. So let's hypothetically say you send out 1,000 emails, right? 1,000. Talk us through how many and which ones would most likely make it to the calling stage. What does that look like?
Yeah, good question. So take a look at this right chart. This is exactly why I put this out. So when you send emails to people you've never spoken to before, so you have not had a conversation with these people, right? These prospects, when you send emails to not contacted leads, you have to do a high volume to get a reasonable amount of people to start calling. And so look at those response rates, 0.01% to 0.25%. You said 1,000 emails, Bob.
Yeah.
What if you did 5,000? That only gets you 12 people to call, right? And maybe 25 if you're lucky. That's why we use the full-blown marketing automation system to communicate to that audience.
Yeah.
But when we speak to people and we don't disqualify them because they're there's only 3 reasons why you're going to disqualify, right? It's the wrong person, it's the wrong company, the data's bad. Otherwise, whether they're interested or not, it doesn't really matter. We're like bulldogs. We never let go until, we never stop calling thanks to the B2B do not call registry laws. We can keep calling. We want to time these phone calls. We don't want to, tick people off because that's not a great way to sell stuff.
Right.
But, we can keep calling because things change. They say no today, but in 3 months that may change.
Right.
So we have a process for that follow-up activity. And when we apply email to that follow-up activity, look at the response rates. Way higher.
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool.
Yep.
All right. So that was it. That is the end of the presentation. If there's any other questions on the back of this webinar, feel free to reach out to me. I'm the only Ken Jisser on the planet that I know of, so I'm easy to find on LinkedIn and Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me with any questions. Our website, thepipelineGroup.io, has a free assessment form. So if you fill out that form and you want to get an assessment of what your sales team is doing today for free, to get some advice and guidance, we're open to that as well. So happy to help.
That's great. Well, both Jim and Ken, thank you so much. There were some real good nuggets in the presentation, some great tips. And I would just kind of sum it up. I think the last few questions at the end did a good job of sort of stating that if you don't have this process planned out, regardless of what kind of automation, auto dialer, irregardless of what you're using, you need to plan out the cadence and you need to do some of these best practices. Ken, there's still companies today that are using dirty data and it's hurting their response rates, right?
Absolutely. We are in a world, we're at a time where data is available. That should be the easiest thing you purchase, right? There's 2 options in life. You got to wait to the marketing program, to the trade show, to the event to acquire new names, or you can just buy the list and invite people to things. One approach is faster than the other. Take a guess which one, right? And then, again, the sales tools that are available today. Look, the problem is, all these sales tools have a lot of overlap, okay? Lots of them have email, lots of them have voice, and lots of them have, different capabilities. Right. It's typically not the tool that's the issue. It's the way you deployed it, the use cases you applied it to, and the adoption of the sales organization. Those are the 3 issues when you're not getting the productivity you were expecting from the tool.
State those 3 again, because that was very helpful. What are the 3 things?
Yeah. Three reasons why these sales automation tools. It's the use cases that the tool was being applied to. It's the deployment of the tool, so the system design and the process internally, or it's the adoption by the sales organization. So if it's not deployed properly, you're not getting adoption, or you're not applying it to the right use cases. There's no wonder, that's why you're not getting the results you're expecting. And if you need help with that, let us know. That's what we do for business.
That's great. That's some good advice there, and that's a good way to end. Wait, one more question just came in. Hold on. With thematic lists, how many call attempts do you make before you stop calling? Good question.
It depends on great question. I'm so glad you asked. It depends on what tool you're using, right? Mm-hmm. If you're using, if you're just manually dialing, you're going to make your 7 attempts and disqualify leads. And by the way, that is a horrible best practice. I know it's one that often is preached by a lot of inside sales experts out there. And I'm here to tell you it's not a best practice. what you naturally do when you do that is you cull your list down to the lower level, mid-level managers in the organization, because they're the easiest people to get on the phone with. And you definitely want to use, the new tools that are available to you. I had, here's a little story. I had a SDR schedule a meeting with the CIO of Barclays Capital. They ended up doing a large 7-figure deal, and they made 147 attempts to get them on the phone. So the number of attempts, the number of attempts you make per prospect really depends on what tools you're using. If you're just manually dialing, you can only make a certain number of dial attempts. If you use automated dialing, you don't have to stop calling people that are the decision makers.
I like that, Ken. I think we got a new stat. It takes 147 attempts. I love it.
They can. Right? I mean,
yeah, I see. I can just see that having a tremendous impact on people wanting to become inside sales professionals.
Oh boy. Well, look, hey guys, that was fantastic today. If you attended today, thanks so much. We'll be sending out a recording, and even for those that are unable to make it, we'll get a copy. So thanks so much. On behalf of the AAISP, we thank you for attending this week's webinar. Everyone have a great rest of your week. Thanks, Ken. Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Bob.